Girl Scout troop. Oh, you can check.
Say Girl Scout.
That'll be fine.
It's the opposite of. No, you're always better off estimating older.
Well, if you wouldn't point it out to everybody, they wouldn't notice.
Jackson, except everybody notices. Right, because they're gonna leave it all.
All right. All right, we're gonna miss Phil, so then that makes everybody's here. Okay, ready? Here we go. Like to call this meeting to order, a regular meeting of the village board on Monday, November 18th at 7 PM in the German Hall Boardroom, and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all village board members present except for trustee Hudson, who is excused. Tonight, we have a special treat with the Girl Scout Troop 16578 are here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Girls, before we say it, you want to turn around so you can face the cameras, and if your parents are watching, they can see you. And kind of wave out there and wave to your parents that are either watching the streaming, or when you go back and look at the YouTube feed, you can see yourself there as well. All right? All right, if everybody would stand then for the Pledge of Allegiance, then girls, you can turn around and we'll face the flag, and then you start because you're leading.
Right, allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Oh. All right, next item is President's Report. Just a couple of things to report tonight. First and foremost, I'd like to, is Joletta here? No. I'd like to thank the Chamber for or the organization and planning for last weekend, Saturday's Christmas event, including the run in the morning, the parade in the afternoon, and then the events at Fireman's Park the rest of the afternoon until the tree lighting at 4:30. It was a great success. A lot of people turned out. I had heard that there were more people at the parade than was previously. And when we were there for the tree lighting, there were a lot of people still there participating in the events at Fireman's Park and lining up to see Santa. So it's a great way to start the holiday. It's one of my favorite events. It kind of gets you in the feeling for the holiday, starts to get you in the mood. And it's also a great family event, and it really wasn't too cold or rainy. So overall, it went really well. So appreciation to the chamber, all their volunteers, and all the planning that went into it to help make this year's event a great success. That's all I have. So we can then go to announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee and department reports. We'll start with committee chairs with trustee. Oh, you haven't been here in a while. I'm sorry, trustee Kaminsky.
Public Works will meet in this room on Wednesday, December 4th at 5:30 PM.
Thank you. Trustee Rick Miller.
General Government and Finance will meet on Monday, December 16th at 5:30 PM.
All right, and anybody that's on the Public Safety Committee, when is the next meeting for Public Safety?
Monday, December 2nd, 6 PM.
Thank you. All right, does anyone else have anything else for announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? Yes, trustee Cutts.
The library board is meeting this Wednesday at 6 PM at the library.
All right, thank you for that. Anyone else of any announcements of forthcoming events of public interest, committee or department reports? All right, if there is nothing else, then we can go to citizen input. Anyone that is within our audience or joining us via WebEx or would like to participate in citizen input, if you're within our audience, please fill out a yellow slip and turn it into our village clerk before you come or as you come forward and come to the podium. If you're joining us via WebEx, just please make your intent known so that the moderator can bring you forward for citizen input. So anyone wishing to come forward at this time for citizen input is welcome to do so. And then just push the button at the base, please. More till the light goes off. You got it, right?
Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about these TIDs because they've been on my mind because I'm totally against this board using them for getting things done in the village. I looked up TID 6, 7, 8, and 9. What taxes are we not getting at all? Number 9, $357,954 a year. Number 8, $3 million. Number 7, $672,000. Number 6, $792,000. That's almost $5 million that are not going into our general fund to help expenses in this village, which is ridiculous. And I did research on TIDs. I mentioned this before of many counties in the country. They're giving them up because they don't want to lose this tax revenue. It's hurting citizens. And here's the benefit of it. If you don't use the TIDs, it will raise the assessed value of property and lower our mill rate quite substantially and lower our taxes. And that's all I've been about is this. I think this board is a little overboard. They say yes to too many things. I think you need to be more conservative. I think there's a lot of things we don't need to do. But 10 to $15 million we have lost in the last several years because of these TIDs. And it's true, I checked with the facts with somebody from our board. So you can look at me with however you want, but it's there. So that's all I've got to say tonight about it. And when I see my tax bill, yours is going to be the same way. So you can complain about it when it goes up for yourself. Thank you.
Ma'am, you do know that those taxes are for all the taxing districts, so that would include the county, the technical schools, the school district, and the village board as well. So we would only receive about 21 to 22% of your total value once those TIDs come online.
I checked with many people on that.
No, I don't doubt that, ma'am. And as they come to fruition in 2032 and 2036, that will be very helpful.
That positive thing on our property.
Ma'am, that's only 7 years away.
That's not a very long time.
That's right. It's not a very long time. Anyone else wishing to come forward at this time for citizen input is welcome to do so.
Got to push it on, right? Or is it on? It's on.
It's
Okay.
on, Steve.
My name's Steven Wazalowski, and I live at West 169, North 10427, Pheasant Run in the Old Farm subdivision. And I'm a member of the Utility Advisory Committee. We had a meeting today at 4:30, and I wasn't really planning on speaking. Usually I got about 12, 15 handouts for everybody. So this is just off the cuff today. But a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about. I know we're still planning. I got questions about the new proposed police station. I know I've made a point once before to talk about the old PNC Bank, and I understand that's under contract with Quick Trip for a possible new gas station, and maybe that's moving ahead. I don't know, but I still like that as my number one location. I've been looking at maps, trying to come up with another spot for the village to put a police station in. And an area that I like is if you took River Lane south from Mequon Road, you go past the Aurora Clinics, and the road dead ends there. Behind that is the old Roscoff's farm, which then abuts a Lilac Lane. Mr. Roscoff passed away in the last year, so I'm not sure what's going to happen to his estate farmland there, if it's going to be farmed by family, become up for sale. But if the village is looking at a spot, I think that would be a a good spot to purchase a chunk of land up on that hill. Would allow you access not only to the north on River Lane to Mequon Road, but I would ask you to purchase a small piece of land so you can exit back onto Lilac Lane. Then you can come and go from either direction quickly for police traffic. So that's the spot that I kind of like to see a police department be built. The other topic was, I keep hearing about another fire station. I'm hearing this number $17 million and it's scaring me. And then I hear people say that, well, you know, we need a second fire. First question is, I'm getting more of the impression that we're looking to replace the existing station number 2 on Maple with a brand new facility. And I think within the last year or so, I sat at a meeting and watched this board approve a $300,000 amount to put a new floor in the fire station. We had to reseal or do something with the floor for $300,000. And now we're going to get rid of that station. I don't know if we are or not, but I think that's crazy. Then I hear people say, well, if we build a second fire station, we can lower the ISO rating through the insurance companies for our fire department, which means you and I save money on our insurance rates, property rates. I've done some research on that too and talked to insurance companies. And I believe Germantown is rated a 3. It goes from 1 to 10. The lower the number, the better you are. So we're really rated quite well. But then I looked at their rating system and they've got what goes into the calculations. To go from a 3 to 2 is extremely difficult. And adding a firehouse anywhere in the community will not get you down to a number 2 rating, nor will it lower anybody's property taxes. So you're going to hear that from people all the time. Oh, we can lower your property taxes. And furthermore, to go from a 3 to a 2 might save you $40 a year on your property tax. We're not talking hundreds of dollars here. And with this ISO rating, the biggest item that you need to get a lower score is to have a water source to fight the fire. Big part of Germantown will have no hydrants. We'll never get hydrants out in some of those parts, especially if you took a brand new fire station and put it up in an area where we had no hydrants, no nothing, and the guy who lives across the street, he's not going to see a single dollar change on his insurance premium. He's got no water. You have no water supply there. You got a tanker, you had 1,000 gallons of water. But when you come rating through the ISO system, you're not going to change that number at all. The second item that counts for 35% of that is personnel. You need the manpower to fight the fire. We've hired, I think, 7 additional firefighters, added a couple to each shift, which is good. But I guess my other question is, if we're adding a second firehouse, the next thing I'm envisioning, we need 10 more firefighters to man that building because we got 6 in this building. We had a hell of a time approving 6, 7 firefighters for $1 million in the budget. So how are we going to pay for a new station, 6, 7, 10 new firefighters? And now, wait a minute, what are they going to do? Sit in the station and play cards? They need fire trucks. What's a fire truck cost? $500,000 is the starting price of a fire truck. An ambulance is $400,000. So are we looking at all these items when you talk about adding a new firehouse? Where's that going to come from? So the other thing I hear, which is a good thing, I think the board should look at, I hear that the possibility of combining into a county fire department. That would be the best thing. Even the city of Milwaukee is now part of the Milwaukee County Fire Department system. There's a fire in the corner of Milwaukee down by St. Francis. St. Francis responds with the city of Milwaukee for that fire. So if you have a fire on the far north end of Germantown, you got Jackson responding with Germantown. So I think the answer is, before you start spending money on a firehouse, talk to the county about this county fire department. It might make far more sense, and we could get them to help pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input?
Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. We heard earlier tonight about the impact study from Ehlers. And a couple of the takeaways that I learned from that is that we should be discouraging large warehouse projects that don't use much water or sewer. And we should be encouraging any kind of development that does use water and sewer. We have a number of those empty warehouses around. The other thing that was interesting is that if you don't, you have to refund impact fees after 8 years. I believe this is correct. After you collect them, if you don't use them on the project. And so I think it would be a good idea to take a step back, look at the 5-year capital plans. We have one that's relatively thorough for the DPW, Department of Public Works. But I think that not all of the other departments did the same level of detail in their 5-year plans. And so that should probably be looked at. And then the order of actual projects that are required to be done, such as whatever is going to happen with public safety, such as whatever is going to happen with library, such as whatever else about the village center, which seems like a nice to do at this stage compared to the $120 million worth of infrastructure deferred maintenance that was identified in the DPW plan. So I think would be a good exercise to sit down and go through that and map out when these projects could actually be done based on utilizing impact fees. Perhaps that's a reason not to have impact fees and to stick with the connection fee for sewer and water. I don't know. All of that needs to be discussed, but more time needs to be spent on it, and it should be in the context of what's going to happen with the village, as well as revisiting the 2050 plan, where for the areas that did not get complete master plans done. So that's some of my takeaways from the Ehlers impact study. The other thing that occurred to me is, and I don't know if this is prohibitive just because of how much money they put into the Kellertown 9 building, but is there a possibility of that building becoming an interim public safety building, or at least part of it, while we get more, we get sorted out with more of the rest of the things, the requirements or the infrastructure problems that we need to address, such as the lift stations. Just a thought, it's probably a silly idea. Those are my comments tonight.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input?
Good evening, Scott Heffley, W159 and 10514 Old Farm, Germantown. I'll save my budget comments for the budget hearing. First of all, good job on the stop loss with Symetra. Saving money for the village is why we do an RFP process. I have heard that we have some very aged RFP processes that we're hopefully looking to fix. We don't wait 20 or 30 years for things like we did earlier today, so maybe there's a new leaf being turned over, and if we keep people accountable, that's the best use of taxpayer money. There's going to be a discussion that you're going to be presented, and I was here for GGF where impact fees were discussed. We discussed impact fees at Utility Advisory that I serve on, and we discussed it again at GGF, and then it's going to be on the village board. And I'm very confused. I drive Division Road 2 to 4 times a day. I live right near there. I'm there all the time. And it looks like we're getting 2 new parks. There's a Division Road Park and a Freistadt Road Park. I don't know anything about that. But in there, I'm confused. It's in the thing. It says there's $6 million assigned to impact fees for parks. Does anyone know of a park on Division Road or Freistadt Road that I don't know about? I don't know where that park would be. That's a question you should ask. Those that know maybe can answer it. I don't know. I've never heard of it.
It's for paths, not parks, right?
Or a path. Okay, where's that going? You know, path, park, whatever. It's $6 million, a lot of money, people. The other thing is, and I know it's going to be discussed by our attorney later, these quorums that we have, these situations where we have walking quorums, where we have trustees show up and then we have 5, 6 people, and then our clerk has to kick you out or whatever. I mean, hopefully there's going to be some sort of a template that you can go by, or it's in a code of ethics, or it's in Robert's rules or somewhere. But I don't mind having trustees at meetings, but you can't just be showing up to make 5 or 6 people there because that's a quorum and that's a problem. Because if it's not, if the citizens don't know that 6 people are showing up and it's a public meeting, I think your attorney will address this, but that is a problem. The last thing is, I'll say is, I am seeing more and more, I've seen trustees interrupt residents. I've seen our presiding officer interrupt residents. I'm really getting upset with that, okay? If you read Robert's Rules of Orders, I have the book, I can bring it if you want, okay? It specifically says that the presiding officer shall not talk during citizen comment for any reason. That is their time to listen. I can bring the handouts next time if you would like. So I'd appreciate no interruptions on behalf of the residents, whether you don't like what they're saying or interrupt them or whatever. Please don't do that. Talk to them later, call them, whatever you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input?
Sarah Larson, Butternut Road. I wanted to start off by thanking you for finally holding a visioning session for the village regarding the village center. At least we had 35 or 40 people that came into the room. I don't know how many were online, but there were some critical flaws with that. Very beautiful presentation, nice PowerPoint. But the way the options were worded, definitely steering, and there was no ability to put in other things that the community would like to see, given that that was all based on the 2050 plan, which we know only 35 or 40 people in the village contributed to. So that isn't really what the village's vision is. Not to mention, because you should have the ability to say either, I don't want development, I don't want development now. I'd like to see development in 3 to 5 years after we take care of the true needs and expenses of the village. And then as we found out tonight in GGF, that little presentation is $57,000. And we have $42,000 for Bailey Copeland, $13,750 for Gray Wolf. And at your last board meeting before going into closed session, it was said that the only expenditure was Bailey Copeland's fee. Well, what about the 1.17 spent on the Grossnick property, which is the village center, the environmental studies for that, the appraisals, the traffic control study for the village center was also already expended. You're at about $1.5 million of taxpayer dollars that you spent on the village center, where we haven't even given a blessing to do a village center. I think we're way out of control with consulting fees, and there should be a study as to how much the village is spending annually on this, and hire some additional staff for public works in an engineering capacity that could defray some of those costs perhaps. The other thing, going back to the village center, I would like to know if this board knew that Gray Wolf Partners was the purchaser for Flower Source, and the fact that you were using that as the contracting services for development. And so a better disclosure on why Bailey left Gray Wolf Partners, and because the average citizen wouldn't know that Gray Wolf owns Flower Source because they buy under LLCs. That one happens to be Germantown Warhawks LLC. They own the parcel that Ascension is located on. There's a Red Badger LLC and several others within the community. And so I think I'd like to know, when I asked Bailey about her compensation, and she said, I'm not making any money on this deal. Well, she's going to make the money from the village. And so as part of the agreement, is there some statement of what kind of fees that she's going to be getting from all those other entities that she's trying to steer Germantown towards? So, thanks.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time for citizen input? Anyone else? Is anyone online?
No.
All right, then we can go on to the next item on the agenda, which is consent agenda. Board?
Make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through G as presented.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve consent agenda items A through G? No discussion? We'll do roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Ketz,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jane Miller,
Aye.
trustee Pieper, trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky, village president Walter.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is public hearing. We have one public hearing on tonight's agenda, starting with item A, 2025 Village of Germantown budget and 2024 tax levy. Give us more information. Are you giving us a presentation or just an oversight of the village budget, Mr. Usilling?
Do that before public comment or after? Up to you.
Let's do it before, just so we kind of have an overview to start from. I'd appreciate that. Was that the plan?
Yep.
That works? Okay, thank you. This is something.
All right, tonight I have a short presentation highlighting the 2025 budget. So the 2025 budget really begins back late spring, early summer, as we begin to compile some of the budget materials and look forward to the upcoming budget season. It's during that time where the department heads craft their budget, referencing, past budgets, projecting forward what the future expenses are going to be as it relates to capital projects, staffing, and other routine maintenance. Those budgets are then reviewed by the finance director, the village administrator, and the department head to balance the budget. Typically, when we come back from department heads, there's excess expenses as it relates to the revenues, and we work to balance that budget to provide a balanced budget to the village board. The village board then spends about a month and a half reviewing the different budgets of the departments and the funds, going through each line item and making changes as they see fit. Following that, leads us to tonight where we have a public hearing and ultimately the adoption of the 2025 budget as well as the 2025 tax levy or 2024 tax levy. Like many communities, the village of Germantown faces similar challenges as relates to inflationary factors, increased demands for services in public safety and recreation at the library. One of the major challenges that many municipalities are facing, including Germantown, are limited revenue options. Compared to the private sector companies. In addition, we always focus on maintaining, competing in a competitive labor market as relates to all village employees. Before you is a general fund overview comparing the 2024 adopted budget to the 2025 recommended budget before you. You'll see the total tax levy increases just over 16% or 1.78 million. This is largely driven by the referendum that was passed in April of 1.44 million. Overall, you can see that the assessed value increased dramatically from 2024 to 2025. This was largely due to the interim market update that realigned assessment values throughout the village. With that change in assessment, you see the mill rate dropped from $5.57 to about $4.54 compared to last year's budget. Overall, this leads to a village property tax increase of about $250 about $233 on village property taxes on the average assessed value of a home. Looking at general fund revenues, you can see that the general fund is largely supported by property taxes, where property taxes fund about 58% of all revenues within the general fund. Followed by that is intergovernmental revenues, whether it be from the state or the county. Some of the highlights for the general fund in the 2025 budget is the adoption and passage of the April 24 referendum, which increased the tax levy about 1.45 million over last year's adopted levy. as well as the village board opted to take the full net new construction of 3%, which increased the levy by about $330,000. State aid increased slightly in the 2025 recommended budget by $266,000, where all other revenue categories decreased just shy of $400,000. This was largely driven by a projected decrease in development in 2025. On the general fund expenditure side, you can see that the majority of the general fund budget is taken up or allocated to public safety. Just over 50% of all expenditures are allocated to the public safety departments of police and fire. Following that is Public Works with 28%, and then the remaining departments throughout the village are funded as presented before you. On the expenditure side, the expenditures incorporate 10 additional firefighter/EMS positions, as well as 4 additional police officers. We also increase funding to the library and recreation programs, which will increase the library operating hours back to their 2023 staffing levels. In addition, the 2025 recommended budget includes a 3% performance bonus for non-union staff, with an additional position allocated to DPW titled the asset manager position. On the capital side, we're budgeting just under $7 million in capital projects, the 2 largest being the 2025 road program, as well as the Division Road reconstruction. Before you is a village property tax levy over the last decade, starting in 2014 and going through 2025. You'll see there was a large increase in 2025, almost entirely driven by the adopted referendum back in April, as well as an increase on the debt service side for the DPW building. Looking at the tax rate, you compare the tax rate from 2014 through the 2025 recommended budget tax rate. You'll see a large decrease in the 25 tax rate. That is almost entirely driven by the reassessment of the village in 2024, and is broken down by the different taxing jurisdictions. So looking at the projected property tax bill for the average resident, you can compare 2024 budget to the 2025 budget. Looking at the tax rate, we're projecting an overall tax rate of about $13.71. This takes into account the school levy credit that the state provides to essentially buy down the tax levy. Taking a look at that, we see that the average tax bill results in about $6,238. Looking at your tax bill, then you'll also notice 2 credits that are received from homeowners. You get the first dollar credit, which in 2024 was $73.89, keeping that flat, as well as the lottery and gaming credit of $275. We project an average tax bill of $5,889 on a $455,000 assessed value home. And that is all I have for my presentation.
All right, thank you. And we can open this public hearing by hereby stating, all residents and taxpayers of the Village of Germantown, please note that a public hearing on the proposed 2025 budget will be held at 7 p.m. or later on November 18th at the Germantown Village Hall on Mequon Road in Germantown. This is a proposed budget. The final levy amount may increase or decrease depending on the majority vote of the board members at the meeting. The Village of Germantown's detailed 2025 budget proposal is available for public inspection at the Germantown Village Hall, located at the clerk's office from 8 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, and online at the village website. So if there's anyone within our audience that would like to come forward to speak for or against the proposed 2025 budget, you're welcome to do so. All I need you to do is come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record, please, and for those that are watching at home.
Good evening, Scott Heffley, W159 and 10514 Old Farm Road, Germantown. I'm more of the budget guy, as you probably have heard over the years. So, the budget's done, and you guys have to approve it so you can get the property taxes out so people can pay their property taxes. So I have a challenge for the board. I know this is just the first part of the puzzle. This is to get the property tax operational budget going. And then you're going to do capital borrowing in February. You wait till that's done and do that. So I can't do anything about this budget, but my challenge is for you to find $500,000 worth of cuts in the capital borrowing budget that you're going to look at in January or February. And I had a discussion with Mr. Krecklo about that. And he says, how are we going to do that? You need squad cars. I never said to cut squad cars. I never said to cut roads. I said to look at everything. And what really this village needs more than anything is a comparison of needs versus wants. We all want to spend, we all want perfect roads, we want. But the needs are more important, and the needs are what matter, okay? If you go to the taxpayers for another referendum, public safety was fine. I voted for it, a lot of people voted for it, we got it. Do you think they're going to just keep going for, you saw the operational referendums that went on around the state, they got destroyed, okay? So you're going to have to live within your budget. And I challenge you guys to do that. You don't have ARPA funds anymore. They're gone. That 2 million's gone. You're going to have to live within your budget. So that's what I'm asking this village to do, is live within your means and see if you can do that. That would be something. Also start the process earlier. You know, I keep saying that every year. We wait and wait and wait. We can't get, you can get on Baker Tilly's, you can get on them anytime you want. You can say, come here in March, we're ready for you. We have to be ready for them. The reason it's so late to get everything out to you is we keep putting them on ice. They will come in when you want it to because they want to get paid. Okay, I have a client that's a retired Baker Tilly auditor. That's what they say. You want to get paid, you come in, you get on the schedule, we're ready to go. So our village staff needs to be ready to go. And I think in March, that'd be great. All right. The asset manager should help us greatly, because the reason we keep hearing it's delayed is the developers don't tell us how much they built, and we don't know what the value is, and we don't know depreciation credits, so we're waiting, okay? Asset manager will identify life cycles on the products we have, we'll know where we're at, and we should be able to provide that information to Baker Tilly and not have to rely on them so much, all right? The last thing I'll say is, my time is probably up, two things. First of all, I don't want any more TIDs. We got 4 TIDs, some doing good, some not doing good. We don't need another one for any reason. I don't care what the development is looked at for. We got to let one close so we can afford to do something else. Close one to open one. Also, I saw it in the newspaper twice. I don't know what it means. I'm on the Utility Advisory Committee. I saw negative balances in sewer and water. Deficiency in revenues minus expenses. They're showing negatives, okay? Maybe that's before depreciation credits. Maybe it's whatever. But in the newspaper, it says they're running at negatives, all right? I'm on the Utility Advisory Committee, and it's never brought up that we're running at negatives. Are we running at a negative or not? I would like the answer to that, because I care, because I'm on the commission. I like to know if we're running negatives and what we plan to do about it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else in our audience that would like to come forward to speak for or against the proposed 2025 budget?
Okay, Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. First of all, congrats to Director of Finance and his team on getting all of the paperwork and budget and audits and everything together earlier this year. We're looking forward to an early start to the audit process next year, since you only have one to do. And I think, if I recall correctly, there was a problem with the developers not getting their paperwork into you on time, which is one of the delays. So maybe you can ask now for that and let them know, get it there. I'd also like to know what the policy is on reducing the debt and debts, and therefore debt service. In the budget meeting discussion last week, we had kind of an interesting discussion because it seemed like a surprise to the village administrator that some of us don't want debt. I know that certain things require debt, but we don't necessarily need to keep adding it just because. And so this is why I'm really appreciative of this Ehlers impact study, because it's actually given us a mechanism to do some proper long-range planning, short and long-range planning, based on the fact of taking advantage of these impact fees and connection fees. So I would encourage that the budget be looked at additionally with the lens of a full 5-year plan with all of the departments having put in their dollar amounts for their needs, as per Mr. Heffley's comment about needs rather than wants. I would also like to see the full use of Tyler Munis in the reports, the summary, so that we're not straddling two systems, if that's possible, and have a good summary of what and a much more easily read budget overview. The last thing I'll say is that we heard earlier today that there's something like $14,000 left in the ARPA funds. I think that should be split up for the library and the Parks Department, since they were gypped last year. And they're not back to the same level, to my understanding. Even though the hours were put back, the library didn't get all of their materials. So you can make that change tonight, and award the last $14,000 to the Parks Department and Library. Thanks.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward at this time to speak for or against the 2025 proposed budget? Anyone else? Anyone online?
No.
There is no one else. This public hearing is now closed. That then takes us to new business, starting with new business item A resolution approving the 2025 village budget. Word?
Move approval of the budget adoption resolution.
I'll second for conversation.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion to approve. Trustee Jan Miller.
I'd like to propose a budget change. That equalizes the budget, yet disperses the money differently. I searched through the budget and I felt like it was a challenge from Matt Uselding to find something that kind of didn't make sense as far as allocating the money. And so I came up with a little plan. And it is, I have a copy for everyone. Would you like to have a copy? Or you can have that. This. Ooh, pass it down. I don't give away from there. My proposal is to move some money out of highways and move it to library and park and rec. So I looked for a line item that wasn't being utilized, and I went to highway number 105-62000, and the new number is 511600. It's called overtime. The 2023 actual amount was $0. The 2024 budget was $25,000, and the revised budget was $25,000. The actual spend for 2024 was $0. And they're recommending the budget to be $25,000 again. So as people look at this, to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Matt Uselding, that this is an allocation that hasn't been used for 2 years. And I think it could be utilized. Pardon me?
No,
That was my
that was
iPad.
an error in audio.
Oh, anyway, so I really, if we're allocating, we have the money where it's been allocated, but it hasn't been utilized in 2 years. And I'm a proponent, if you have something in your closet and you don't use it for 2 years, you better donate it. So that's how I looked at this. My recommendation is to take actually, you're just moving the $25,000 out of the highway overtime that hasn't been used in 2 years and split it between the library and Park and Rec, because they did have to fund their budgets by adding donations and sponsorships to their budgets. Library still needs part-time person to complete the hours regained, and the Park and Rec will need additional people to assist with managing the 4th of July parade once again in 2025. So that would give the library and Park and Rec departments a split of $12,500. And the full budget for the highway department is $3,325,116. That is my proposal.
Proposal, or are you making a motion?
It's a motion.
Is a motion made to amend the motion to approve the budget as it was proposed. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Kaminsky.
Can we hear from Matt about why that $25,000 should remain in the budget?
Where it is?
Somebody that would know? Oh, I meant Matt.
Matthew.
Okay.
It's Matt and Matthew.
So looking at that line, in 2023, that year-to-date is 0 because that was a new line in 2024. So that account didn't exist in 2023. Going to look at the year-to-date for 2024, there was a journal entry made to account originally that overtime was being counted in the regular salaries. So we did do a journal entry to move that to overtime. The year-to-date is only $5,000, but there has been some expenditures. I would, Matt can speak more to that. I would recommend leaving some in there for overtime because I do know those folks do use overtime, especially in the winter for snow plowing. But the year-to-date expenditure is $5,000. So just want to make that comment.
And I would just emphasize that that is the primary way that we pay for snow operations. And the reason probably that you're only seeing that 5,000 or so is because we're only through half of the snow season in 2024. There's still the opportunity to have some operations through the remainder of the year. And then, of course, it's very weather dependent. If we happen to have more frequent storms, we'll be out doing what we have to do. And that would then have a negative impact on the budget.
Could be out on Thursday.
Let's hope you didn't jinx us.
Well, I said there was a chance.
There's a
of snowing
chance.
afternoon.
It's getting colder.
So the budget that was, that we received was not updated, Matthew? Or missed some? And where, if you had overtime in the last, in a couple of years, where was it located?
Yeah, so historically, the overtime was just allocated to the regular salaries and wages line. There wasn't a dedicated overtime line for those departments. So we created that in 2024 to better track the overtime. When we switched from MSI to Munis, it defaulted back to going into the regular salaries and wages. So we did a journal entry at the end of October, beginning of November, to reallocate that overtime back into its proper line. So if you looked at the year-to-date budget in the GGF agenda and looked at highway, you'd see the year-to-date it's about $5,000.
Okay. And when we have public safety overtime, it's been as high as $200,000, and there's a separate line item,
Correct.
but it's not taken out of their budget, is it? Wasn't it taken out of the general fund?
Correct. Their overtime is located in the general fund.
Okay. So there's money in the general fund, right? To cover overtime.
Correct. There's budgeted funds to cover overtime in the departments.
Even if you allocated, you revised your budget and you went over, there's still money in general fund to cover the overtime. Is that correct?
If I can just interject in this, the general fund, you can think of it, the general fund is the big
Right.
budget. Each department is within the general fund. So if so the public safety police department overtime is budgeted within the police department budget, which is within the general fund. But there's no additional money that if a department goes over their overtime, there's not an additional pot of money someplace for that to come from.
So the actual, or the revised is, or the remainder is 20,000, correct?
There's about $20,000 remaining in the 2024 budget for highway overtime, correct?
Okay.
For 2024.
For 2024.
Further discussion on the motion to amend, or you still have the floor, trustee Miller, or?
Well, I would, if there is, I understand I understand that there's 20,000. So what I would say is split it 10 and 10.
So are you then changing your motion, or you're just saying it to whatever is in that amount current or
Split to
account
whatever
currently
is left,
to split?
split to whatever the amount
The
is.
motion change would be to whatever the remainder is within that budget line to split between Park and Rec and the library. Is that also okay with the second?
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion on that motion to amend? No further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, trustee Warren.
I appreciate trustee Miller trying to find funds for the library and Park and Rec, but I believe that 5,000 for overtime was one storm in January. And we're not through the season yet, so I'd hate to second guess Mother Nature and sell ourselves short here on just a roll of the dice. So I would not be in favor of this amendment.
Further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Opposed, raise your hands. Motion fails. Back to the motion as presented. Further discussion? No further discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts,
Aye.
trustee Bum,
Nay.
trustee Jim Miller,
Nay.
trustee Pieper. No. Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky. Village President Walter.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is under new business, a resolution approving the levying of property taxes for village purposes.
I don't have much to say on this item. With the passage of the budget, that we now need to have the authority to levy those taxes on people's property tax bills.
Motion to approve.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion to approve. No discussion? Roll call vote, please. Trustee Kaminsky. Trustee Baum, seconding?
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Cutts,
Aye.
trustee Bum,
Aye.
trustee Jim Miller,
Aye.
trustee Pieper. Aye. Trustee Rick Miller.
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky. Village President Walter.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item under new business is item C, resolution authorizing the placement of special charges on the 2024 tax roll against certain properties.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren?
Aye.
Trustee Ketz? Trustee Baum?
Aye.
Trustee Jen Miller? Trustee Peeper? Trustee Rick Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky? Village President Walter?
Aye. Next item under new business is item D, 3-year subscription for the police department phone system. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion or any question? Trustee Rick Miller?
As came through GGF tonight with a positive recommendation.
All right, thank you. Trustee Peeper?
Real quick, I know Chief Snow, didn't we have an outage with the phone system in the last year or two? Something happened with the phone systems, they were brought down. I remember getting an email. Okay, so we don't know the cause of that outage. You're already.
The response was, I'm sure somebody does, but Chief Snow is not aware of the details.
Okay. Do you know by chance?
This is just really moving from POTS lines to internet line VoIP.
Okay,
That's all.
that was the outages that we were
I think
having.
it was, yeah. I think it was, I'm not quite sure what the outage was, but
I'm just concerned if we renew for 3 years that there's not going to be
Yeah.
any outages for the phone.
Yeah.
We have Avaya phones. Or they have Avaya.
there it's go.
So that's the actual connection, but phone system wise.
Ms. Hearn?
May I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I think the one that you're talking about, there were cable lines cut by a construction company that were lines that went to our phone system. So I think that's the one you're talking about. And those were cable lines that were cut. And
Cable lines meaning internet?
no, I'm sorry, the fiber
Phone
lines.
lines.
Phone copper lines. Yes, I'm
Gotcha.
sorry.
Okay.
But for this new contract, it's a new contract. The old one was with AT&T and this one would be with Spectrum. So we already have an internet contract with them. And so this is just for SIP trunk lines now, so.
Yeah, but okay, and yeah, I understand, because you guys still have Avaya phones, but this is just bringing the lines to the police station. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hearn. Further discussion on a motion to approve? No further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren?
Aye.
Trustee Ketz?
Aye.
Trustee Baum?
Aye.
Trustee Jen Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Peeper?
Aye.
Trustee Rick Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky? Village President Walter?
Aye. Motion passes. Next item under new business is item E, annual stop-loss contract with Symetra.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Trustee Rick Miller.
This also came through GGF tonight and came through with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Further discussion on a motion to approve?
Who seconded, please? Thank you.
No further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren?
Aye.
Trustee Ketz?
Aye.
Trustee Baum?
Aye.
Trustee Jen Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Peeper? Aye. Trustee Rick Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky? Village President Walter?
Aye. Motion passes. Next item in a new business is item F, discussion related to open meetings law, quorums, and attending meetings of other bodies. More background information on this new business item. We'll turn the meeting over to our village attorney, Brian Shadak.
Sure. So this evening, we're just going to kind of touch on a couple issues related to really quorums and attending meetings. We've had a couple issues recently as it relates to trustees attending other meetings and how all of that works. Just kind of wanted to run through those rules again. I know some of you have heard this before, some of you maybe haven't, but it's always a good reminder because at the end of the day, remember that you folks are the ones that get the call from the district attorney if there's ever a problem. It's not staff. Because it's ultimately up to you and your responsibility to make sure you're following the rules. So with that, Just a reminder that basically what the statute tells us is that every meeting of a governmental body has to have public notice that's provided. That seems to be pretty straightforward, but as we'll see, it gets a little bit confusing sometimes as we look at what a meeting particularly is. So when we look at what constitutes a meeting, again, the statute does a pretty good job for us of defining what a meeting should be. It talks about the convening of members of a body for the purpose of exercising its responsibilities, authority, powers, or duties. Continues to say that if more than 1/2 of the members are present somewhere, it is presumed that a meeting has occurred. We can rebut that presumption, but as any lawyer will tell you, it is virtually impossible to rebut a presumption like this. How do you prove a negative, in short? And so certainly you always want to look to avoid having more than half of any particular body somewhere as part of that, as it relates to their business. Of course, the term under the statute does not include any chance social gathering that takes place. So, for example, if all of you were, happen to all, appear at the local tavern, for a party for some citizen here in the community that's having a 100th birthday party, for example, that's a chance social gathering that we wouldn't have to necessarily worry that a meeting took place, because clearly you're not doing anything that relates to the government's authority when you attend there. Obviously, be careful when you are in those circumstances, however, because you never know who's listening, and there's always sometimes that urge to say, oh, can you believe what happened at the village board the other night, or something like that. If that type of stuff happens, you've now taken it outside of that chance encounter, and you're actually dealing with business that you're talking about. And so you do have to be careful when you're looking at those types of things. There's a case that back in the 80s, the Showers case, really kind of sets the guidelines for us as it relates to a lot of this. What the Showers case tells us is that first, there has to be a purpose to engage in governmental business in order to have a meeting. But the key component there of the Shower case is that, aside from the obvious things, like we're going to vote on something, we're going to discuss something or debate something, one of the things that Showers case expressly identifies as governmental business is information gathering. So if you're going to a location to gather some information that might, be helpful to you as you're looking to exercise your authorities on the village board, that certainly would qualify as a governmental business under the Showers case. The second piece of the Showers case is that the number of members must be present, must be sufficient to determine the parent body's course of action. So clearly, anytime you would have a quorum together, that group could determine the course of action of that parent body, clearly. However, we run into interesting questions about quorums then. Quorum, in short, is really just the number of people that you need to have in order to actually hold the meeting. That, for most bodies, is defined as 50% of the committee plus one. Obviously, if you have an even number, you can't have 4.5 people, for example. So you round up to that next number in order to get your quorum. So, for example, a body that had 7 members, quorum of that would be 4 in order to hold a meeting. Within the packet was the last memo, written memo that I did on the subject to the village board. Some of you previously received it. Some of you are new enough that you wouldn't have seen that. But within that packet and of information is a form that looks a lot like the one on the right. This is actually not, or actually this is ours. This is a form that we kind of created just to kind of give you a handy cheat sheet in terms of when you have to worry about things. And you see there, you identify what the voting membership is in the first column, the maximum number of people that arguably could meet outside of a meeting without causing any problems, and then the minimum number that could potentially meet. And you see there in the bold at the very bottom is that our advice is always that you adhere to that minimum number, which in your case means that two of you could potentially meet outside of a meeting and be fine. Anything more than that creates problems from a quorum standpoint. Now, why do we say that? We say that because there's the concept of a negative quorum. Negative quorum, in short, is the number of people that would be necessary to block action of the parent body. So just as you can dictate the course of action of a body by doing something in the affirmative, we're going to vote to approve something, you could also dictate the course of action of the body by blocking that particular action. And so, as all of you know, for example, if we were to tie this evening on any items because we're missing Trustee Hudson, we potentially would have a 4-4 vote. That would mean that that would fail, whatever that motion would be. And so you've effectively taken action for the body by blocking action. The Showers case talks a little bit about negative quorums, and Showers case really talks about the idea that we worry about negative quorums just because politics is what politics is. Your enemy today may be your alliance partner on the next day, and so we worry about what types of conversations are going on outside of meetings that are there. The reason that we really recommend to you to follow that minimum number is, and this actually is a newer case from 2018 that just kind of supported our conclusion, which has been longstanding. But the Dane County case that's referenced there really, I think, hammers home the need to make sure that we're worried about the pure theoretical minimum at all times, because we never know specifically who's going to or not going to be at any particular meeting. Dane County, the Dane County case involved a circumstance where a number of the Dane County board members had been present at a particular location. And Dane County Board, for those of you who aren't familiar, is insane. They've got like 33 members or something like that. It's huge. The court in that case actually did the quorum analysis not based on the actual membership, so the total members and what was there, but did it based on the number of people that actually were present and voted on the issue that all of these people had been together to talk about. And so that tells me that when the courts are going to look at whether or not a quorum takes place, they're going to look at the actualities of, hey, were there enough people there or not? And since obviously we never know whether or not you're going to have a full house or only a bare minimum quorum, you always want to act like there's going to be potentially that bare minimum quorum, because that's the best way to keep you safe from getting a call from the district attorney's office saying, hey, there's been a problem. The kind of next issue really kind of hammers home the point of the experience that we've just had recently. There was I think a public safety or public works committee meeting that took place where it was an issue, and then I think there was economic development board meeting or some other meeting that it happened as well, which is this concept of going to another meeting for the purposes of gathering information, find out what's going on. There's a longstanding case, the Badke case, which effectively talks about the concept of, hey, it's going to happen where folks go to meetings to gather that information. Again, another case talking about just gathering information being sufficient to or to be governmental business, and thus potentially a meeting. And what the Badke case really says is that the fact that the public wasn't made aware of the fact that there were going to be these members from the village board in that case that attended the plan commission, that was a problem under the open meetings law because, as we'll talk about in a moment, the notice requirements are that you have to reasonably apprise the public of what is going to take place at the meeting. And so what Badke says is that the public who sees agendas day in and day out for all of their governmental meetings, if they're paying attention, isn't going to be highlighted the fact that, hey, there's a particular development that might be controversial because now there's, you know, a quorum of the village board showing up to find out what's going on as well. That's information that the public might want to know when they're determining whether or not they want to go to the planning commission meeting or not. And so the Badke case really designed or was out of that was born this concept of what us lawyers call a Badke notice. You'll see on a lot of agendas in communities, including some of ours, for example, the Plan Commission, where we identify at the bottom of the agenda that, hey, there may be a quorum of some other body, the village board or whatever, that may be attending this meeting. And as a result, it's going to technically be a meeting under the statutes and the law, even though we're not going to take any action. And so we put that notice on there just to cover the fact that the statute just require us to provide notice that a meeting has happened and talk about whatever is going to take place. And so if there's not going to be any action, just simply saying, hey, you guys are all going to be present is sufficient, as long as we identify, you know, the what's going to be talked about there. Trustee Pieper.
So long story short, if we plan on attending different meetings that we are not on the committee for, we need to let whoever is creating the agenda to properly notice it, right?
Correct. That's where we're going to get to at the end here, in terms of what's there. So as it relates to notice requirements, as I say, the key here is that the statute contemplates being reasonably apprised of what's going to take place at the meeting. So that's why you see on our agendas, we go through details of, you know, the specific contract and who it's with and those types of things that are on there instead of just, you know, approval of a contract. And so the key kind of component as Trustee Pieper just kind of went to is that when we look at the case law that talks about it, and here's just one example of some case law where the courts really say that there's not a bright line rule. There's no right answer or wrong answer sometimes on what is or isn't appropriate notice, that it's going to be a completely fact-based analysis of what took place, what didn't take place, those types of things. And so as a result, our recommendation is that you just notify the clerk's office in advance if you're going to plan on attending a meeting that isn't your own. Now, the question becomes, well, why don't you just put a Badke notice on all meetings? The problem with that is that if we go back to the Badke case, where it talks about, you know, the reason why we care in Badke that we didn't have that notice is because we need to apprise the public that, hey, there's something unique about this meeting that might cause you to want to pay attention to it. The fact that there's going to be this other body that's going to be there. If we put the Badke notice at the bottom of every agenda, that doesn't do that anymore because now it's just, you know, run of the mill, you know, the same old type of thing. What you're going to see in moving forward, at least for the committees that meet immediately before the village board, we're going to put the Badke notice at the bottom of all of them. The reality is that every time that meeting goes anywhere near 7 o'clock, we've got other trustees sitting in the back of the room, either paying attention intently or passively, you know, but they're here. So I think that we can fairly reasonably assume that you know, you're going to end up potentially with a quorum that's going to be at every one of those potential meetings. Is that the best practice under the statute and the law? Probably not, because it's not doing a real great job of highlighting the fact that, hey, this might be a unique or special circumstance that you need to pay attention to. And in fact, I talked with one of the attorneys in the Attorney General's office about this at the end of last week, just to kind of get his take on it because it is a little bit of a weird circumstance, mostly because of the number of people that we have on our committees. I mean, our committees themselves, the subcommittees, effectively already violate the rules in terms of what's going on. And so we're a little bit unique in that perspective. And what the Attorney General ultimately said is that, you know, you have to do the best that you can. And where you know that there is always going to be somebody that's going to be there, you should just put it on there, even though it's not highlighting it necessarily for the public, because we know that that's going to take place. But we're not going to do that for, you know, Public Works, for example, which typically meets on a night other than a village board night. So if any of you intend on going to a Public Works meeting, you need to make sure that the clerk's office knows 24 hours in advance that you plan on attending that meeting. If you want to go to the Utility Advisory Committee meeting, you know, the same thing would apply there as well. The key really is just to notify the clerk's office. Let the clerk's office figure out whether or not that notice is ultimately going to be required or not. Because if, you know, the clerk's office gets 4, you know, notices that, hey, we're all going to go to the Utility Advisory Committee meeting, then the clerk is going to know that we have to send that notice in terms of what's going on. So that's kind of the takeaway from what's there in terms of how you handle the circumstance where you show up and you've got, you know, a quorum that potentially is there. You know, the practice is exactly correct in terms of what took place. You typically would ask those who, you know, are in violation to potentially leave. And in my practice, typically that looks like, you know, the last one to arrive is the first one to leave. And then you just keep ticking off people until you get to the point where you don't have a quorum issue anymore. You know, again, notify the clerk's office so that we know whether or not we have to issue that bad key notice, either as part of the agenda or as a separate notice that might go out otherwise. So,
Question?
I can just add to that.
Okay, village clerk, 4 questions.
Sure. If I could just add to that, thank you very much for that, Attorney Stadak. It's very important now that we've moved the date up to give you a little bit more time to review your materials and packet, that the notice has to obviously be posted and sent out to you guys, and we're doing that now on Thursdays. So I think it's very important to note that if you're planning on attending, we need to know it prior to then. Would that be a safe assumption?
Correct, yes. I mean, if we're going to put notice that you're going to be in attendance at the meeting, whether it's part of the agenda or just a separate quorum notice that we might put out, the rules are the same. It has to be at least 24 hours before that meeting. And so, you know, we need to know, you know, at least a day in advance of the meeting that you're going to be there so that we can do that notice. You know, and now, as I say, certainly anything before the village board in terms of the you know, either the public safety or the GGF committee meetings, we're going to have that notice on all of the meetings going forward, just because we know it's likely that you're going to be here at least at the end of the meetings. So we're going to cover that. But, you know, any other meeting, you know, take into account if it's on a Monday, if you want to go to the Plan Commission, for example, which is on a Monday, you need to make sure that the clerk's office knows by Friday so we can get that notice out in time, you know, by the end of the day on Friday, so that you can attend that meeting.
Yeah. And that's a notice of possible quorum, which would then go onto our posting boards in addition to our website. And we would respectfully ask that you wouldn't be calling us at, you know, 4:15 to do that. So the more time in advance that you can give us as a courtesy, that would be very helpful.
Questions? Trustee Ball.
What is the protocol trustees should abide by for addressing the subcommittees? Are they supposed to address the subcommittees or not supposed to address subcommittees?
Not really part of what this presentation was designed to cover. I will tell you that I am working on a written document that kind of covers those rules in depth. The short answer is it depends. That's the typical, like, prototypical lawyer answer. It depends. But you know, your best practice is to avoid doing that. But in general, at the subcommittees, if it's something that ultimately is a quasi judicial type action. There we potentially run into issues if you're speaking at a subcommittee or planning commission or really any committee or body for that matter. If it's not a quasi judicial thing, there's a little bit more leeway on that because the fact that you may show bias in advance, for example, isn't as critical if it's not a quasi judicial. So there is a little bit of gray area, but generally we don't recommend doing that. Just because at the end of the day, if it's something that ultimately is going to come to the village board is really your opportunity to have the discussion or issues that you want to do. Now, on a purely policy, not quasi judicial thing, obviously sometimes speaking at the committee helps because it shortens the board meeting and we want to do all of our heavy lifting at the committee level. And so, there, at least at the subcommittees, we would anticipate that there would be more leeway on non-quasi judicial type actions. But again, the thought is that ultimately this is where the non-committee members have the ability to have their say in terms of what's going on. So.
Other questions? Trustee Rick Miller.
I assume this is also for attending online, since that's now legal to do, I guess.
Correct. Yeah. Attendance online is the same rules. It's still potentially a meeting in terms of what's going on. I mean, you run into all sorts of fun issues. Trustee Miller and I, for example, the other Trustee Miller, have talked at one point about the idea of sending a one-way communication, just like if I wrote a letter to all of the trustees, being an okay process. But if we start as part of our email world where everything is going back and forth and, it's easy to respond, the more it looks like what takes place at a meeting, there's a lot of back and forth and input and thoughts, that's where we now go from the idea of it being that one-way communication, which is totally fine under the statute and according to the AG, to what we would call a walking quorum. You're doing something outside of a meeting to try to dictate the course of the action of the body at the end. So it gets a little bit weird when you're talking about electronic communications and appearances, just because it does make it easier. But at the end of the day, the rule is the same.
So it's not really a gray area, but the distinction between is that if I log on WebEx, say I'm Rick Miller, I'm attending the meeting. If I watch it on YouTube or on Channel 25, I'm just listening.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? I wasn't quite clear on your response to the Plan Commission meeting. Are you going to post that for possible quorum or not?
Plan Commission, we have posted just generally for all meetings, just because, again, the membership of the Plan Commission, you've already got 2 of you typically there on the regular. We also know, just by virtue of other members of the village board, that there's typically more in attendance at almost every meeting. I mean, it's, not to call anybody out, but Jan, I know, goes to a lot of the meetings now. Trustee Zabel, I know, used to go to a lot of the meetings when he was a trustee. So it's something that it happened with enough frequency that it just made sense to just add it at that point, to cover that. So.
All right. Any other questions? Trustee Warren.
So help me with this complicated math. So using the Public Works Committee, we've got 4 trustees on the committee. So if one trustee is in the crowd, is that exceeds our limit? So no trustee could be in the crowd during a Public Works Committee.
Correct, unless we've noticed it either on the agenda or with a separate notice that we may have a quorum of the village board present. You can't have even that additional individual.
You have to call in 24 hours before if you're choosing to attend.
Okay.
Right. And, you know, believe me, I mean, you know, the AG and I, or well, I should say the Assistant Attorney General, I'm not like I'm talking to the actual AG when I call over there. But we spent probably a good half hour to 40 minutes talking about the concept of, you know, you've already got a quorum arguably as part of the committee. Do you really need to, you know, notice it again because you're just adding one? And, you know, he kind of scratched his head like I did, and ultimately even his recommendation would be, no, I think you just got to notice it, and you want to notice it as, you know, as much as you can on a case by case basis. And so, you know, if it gets to the point where we know that, you know, at Public Works too, that we're going to have a quorum plus one or plus more at every meeting, we may look to doing bad key notices at the bottom of that too. And leave it at that. The other thing I'll just remind you is that we also, you know, if you look at agendas for other communities, like a lot of them do it wrong, in my opinion, and actually wrong in the AG's opinion as well, where they'll just put a general notice that says, well, you know, just so you know, anybody from any committee may show up, and that'll technically be a meeting, but they're not going to take any action, and so it's fine. That probably doesn't qualify. And so we typically will, what you'll see is we'll call out specifically the village board as one of the things that could potentially take place. Remember that you're also members of individual committees. Public Safety Committee, Library Board, you know, those types of things. You may find yourself in a position where you're going to a different meeting other than that subcommittee on something that relates only to that subcommittee that we still then have to worry about. Not so much on the pure subcommittee, you know, the Public Safety, Public Works, and GGF, but for those of you who are on some of the other bodies, the, you know, Senior Advisory, or the Library Board, those types of things, you may find yourself in a position where you're going to a meeting, you know, of the Plan Commission, for example, to talk about, you know, new plans for the library. Just spitballing here. You know, we would need to specifically call out that maybe a quorum of the library board might be present. And so just because you see that there's a quorum notice that says village board, but if you've got a quorum of some other body, that also applies. And so we could end up in a circumstance where you have a list of, you know, it could be the village board and the library board and the economic development committee and, you know, that kind of stuff on the list of, you know, folks that potentially are going to be there. So just so that, you know, we're kind of doing it right. Again, the idea is ultimately that we're trying to keep the public as reasonably well informed as we can, given the circumstances. So,
Any other questions? Trustee Cutts?
I just wanted to get a little clarification because you were talking about the library board and I'm on there. And there's been several meetings here where several of the library board members have come to the meeting. Do they have to let you know, or how does that fall into it?
they likewise should be notifying. I think, do we do those agendas or do they do them
They do them.
themselves?
They do them.
They do their.
You know, so I mean, you know, library board should be notifying the library folks to make sure that they're covering, you know, their basis on those types of things. You know, the couple cases that I'm aware of, you know, you didn't have probably a quorum of folks that were here, even with you or the folks that were before you, because it's usually not a lot of the library board that shows up. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that you have to keep in mind that we may be even on the village board needing to put a bad key notice on for, you know, some other committee as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? No other questions? Thank you, Brian. Next item under new business is item G, award of contract to J. Miller Electric in the amount of $383,255 for generator replacements at well number 2 and 7.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve? This came before Public Works.
It did, with unanimous approval. No, wait, I take that back. I think Bob was against it, but for different reasons. We're going to take a look at GGF at, percentage of, yeah.
Okay. Anything to add, Matt? All right. Any further discussion on a motion to approve? No further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Warren,
No.
trustee Ketz,
Aye.
trustee Baum,
Aye.
trustee Jim Miller,
No.
trustee Peeper, trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
trustee Kaminsky, village president Walter.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. That takes care of all items under new business and on tonight's agenda. So then we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you all for watching, and have a good night.
All right. On to the next.